Is vote looking at prison reform or is vote looking at prison abolition? This is Max Rameau, strategist, theorist, author, and organizer with Pan African Community Action, and you are listening to The Next World, a podcast about building movements. Once a month on this show, we will explore and celebrate the work of poor people's movements, particularly in the U.S. We will highlight innovative and powerful organizing campaigns and community building led by women, LGBTQ folks, Black communities, and other people of color that are pushing the boundaries and have the potential to transform the society. Today on the show, we are excited to welcome activist Laketa Smith, a voice of the experienced in Louisiana. Laketa and I will talk about her journey from environmental justice activism to fighting for the rights of the formerly incarcerated. And we discuss issues including transformative justice and the question of reform versus abolition. An important note about today's episode: this was recorded before the COVID-19 had been declared a pandemic. Of course, communities in jail and prison are more at risk now than ever before, and the need to free them all has become more urgent than ever. For that reason, we wanted you to hear from a grassroots organization that is led by the formerly incarcerated. It's time to introduce our guest, Laketa Smith. She's a proud dual member of Voice of the Experience in their New Orleans and Baton Rouge chapters, and executive director of Abella La Femme Society, and a mentor and advocate for social justice. Okay, so Laketa Smith from Vote, thank you for coming on and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? What kind of household were you in? What kind of community did you grow up in? Tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I am originally from New Orleans. I reside in Baton Rouge currently for the past 14 years, and I grew up in Eastern New Orleans. And my grandparents raised me. They were local activists in the community. And so this is almost like second nature to me to be a community servant and to advocate for people who are like myself, a minority, and that are, facing so many different injustices that we know the history of America. As a child, I learned about police corruption at a very, very young age. I learned about a criminal justice system at a very early age from my cousin, Jerome Robertson. He was actually sentenced to life in Angola. And I can recall,
And that's Angola Prison
attending,
in Louisiana.
yes, Louisiana State Penitentiary. With that, I looked at my family and I looked at the dynamics of how broken we were when he was sentenced. And he always proclaimed that he was innocent. And even some of the witnesses said that he wasn't the person that committed the crime. And looking at that at a young age, he was a minor when he was actually sentenced to be spending the rest of his life in prison with a lot of grown adults and a lot of men who committed various crimes. So, for me, that's when things begin to become in perspective that, we have an issue here. That was my first brush of learning the injustices that we face, especially Black America, with the criminal justice system and the school to prison pipeline.
But your parents were also activists. What issues, so this is kind of runs in your blood, I guess, in some way. What kind of issues did they take on? What kind of organizing did they do?
Okay, so let me start with my mom. My mom did a lot of organizing in the lower ninth ward with Press Park. It's called the Agriculture Street Landfill. And my mom was one of the main organizers to get that landfill case brought before the judge. It took like 23 years. And it's almost like the same incident that happened with Flint, Michigan, that is
Wow.
going on currently with Flint. And so what happened was the city of New Orleans and some of the developers actually decided to purchase toxic land and to build subsidized housing on that property, knowing that that was hazardous and that they shouldn't build on it. And they done that and also leased to residents, local residents. And so my mom was one of those residents, as well as a lot of my family members. And it was called Press Park. And in Press Park, a lot of people have died through the struggle of trying to get relocation and trying to get some funding for these individuals that have developed cancer, aneurysms, a lot of health conditions. It's just been a mess. It's been a very, very toxic 20 plus years in this fight of justice. And they're still having a fight with the Gordon Plaza. So I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that, what's happening with Gordon Plaza, but Gordon Plaza is an extension of the Press Park housing, and that was designed for our elderly. So we have a lot of people that have already passed away that hasn't even seen justice, or their family is still trying to fight for justice. And we're trying to fight now and advocate for full funded relocation for these people in our community. And so yeah, that was one of the big major things that mom done.
Okay, so that was your mother. So your mother was engaged in this, what I guess this would have preceded the current version of the term, but really environmental justice, fighting against environmental racism in a real way.
And my grandparents, they did Veterans Affairs, criminal justice reform, of course, homelessness.
And when your grandparents were going to these meetings and organizing these events and doing these things, and when your mother was doing the same, were you attending meetings as a child? What was the way you
I
remember it?
was attending. I was attending meetings and I was excited. I was doing the work as a junior organizer because I was understanding the dynamics of what it takes to get the people engaged, what it took to get people to come out and understand and listen. And with my grandparents, you know, being in a community and directly impacted by the injustices, it fuels the passion. And they had a lot of different people that came together with them. With my grandfather in general, he done a lot of work for the workers union, the laborers union, and making sure that, like with the Port of New Orleans and all of the Longshoremen's Association, people of color, got fair treatment. So my hands was in a lot at a young age, and I understood the dynamics of, what was at cost and, how this thing play out sometimes in Louisiana politics.
Hmm. Did you ever feel like you were being dragged to meetings and you didn't want to go and you developed any level of resentment towards these meetings? You were going as a child. You could have been watching TV or playing outside.
I didn't because it was always optional. It wasn't forced, and that's what I love about and I appreciate about my loving grandparents, which are both deceased now. But that's what I really, really love, that it was an option for me, and I choose to be there because it was a passion for them and loving them. I wanted to see what made them happy, and I learned that community service was first.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Voice of the Experienced, or otherwise known as VOTE, which is in New Orleans, but also in Baton Rouge and a couple of other places?
Yes, I am a proud member of Vote. Vote, we actually have New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, and Shreveport chapters of the organization, and it was actually founded back in Angola in 1987. Our executive director, Norris Henderson, and a few other guys came together and they founded the Angola Special Civics Project. And that's how Vote actually started. And the organization is a wonderful organization because it allows the members to be able to advocate, community engagement, also to volunteer with several different other organizations and allies. Vote have like over 30 allies that are local and national. And that within itself is something to really be proud of because within the members, even though Vote mission is to restore the full human and civil rights of formerly and currently incarcerated people, it also has an avenue for the family. Even though you may not have served time or ever even have an experience with prison, but through your family members,
So anyone who's impacted by the prison industrial complex, really.
or even not even impacted that just want to get involved with criminal
Hmm.
justice reform, Vote is that place.
But it was founded inside of Angola, inside of one of the most notorious prison systems in the United States and ultimately in the world.
That's right. In 1987, so just think about that. In 1987, and officially in 2003. So Vote been doing the work a very, very long time. And mind you that it was founded in the prison. So the advocation came from the families and the people that were indirectly affected that was on the outside doing the work to help this organization stay afloat all these years.
So the organization Vote then works with issues that surround the system of mass incarceration or criminal justice system, but it also is for people who are impacted by it, even if not directly, they had a family member in, or people who
Yes.
just care about the issue. So does it matter if formerly incarcerated persons are in the leadership? Is it anyone who's in the leadership? What is the position of Vote on leadership by people who are incarcerated versus leadership by people who are just thinking about this issue all the time?
Well, I'll say that Vote is ran and operated by formerly incarcerated people. And it depends on the passion and the knowledge and the expertise, but definitely the formerly incarcerated people are at the forefront of this organization, as should be, because they're the ones directly impacted. And I always believe that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution.
And so what are the issues, the major issues that Vote confronts, that Vote tries to work with or deal with?
We deal with anti-discrimination. So we fight against formerly incarcerated people who are being discriminated, whether it's housing, employment opportunities. Like we worked on unanimous jury campaign. We worked on actually restoring the voting rights of formerly incarcerated people, which was passed Act 636 in Louisiana. And so we also do civic engagement, making sure that we educate our members, the community, as well as their family members, and we do reentry support.
And so rights restoration has been passed in the state of Louisiana. In other words, people who have served their time and were convicted, whether they were guilty or not, and were denied the right to vote while in prison, once they serve their time, they're able to vote immediately afterwards in Louisiana.
Yes, according to Act 636.
And when did that pass?
This passed last year.
Oh, okay. And did you work closely with the folks in the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition? In 2018, there was a nationally regarded Rights Restoration Amendment, Amendment 4, that passed with about 65% of the vote, that gave basically 1.4 million incarcerated people, formerly incarcerated people, the right to vote. Even if not automatically, they automatically were eligible to vote. Did you work closely with them? Was that a model for the work that you did there in Louisiana?
It was a similar model, actually. And so what happens is with the different allies, we have leadership that will actually go into meetings and trainings. And what they do is they're base those efforts on the models that work, and then in terms come back and educate the members and the people that's going to be more on the ground, that's going to be out doing the work and engaging into the community and letting them know that, hey, this is what we need to vote on. Here's the issues when we don't vote, and having this act done. We worked closely with our Louisiana legislators to get this passed. It took over 4 years.
It took over 4 years for the whole thing to work its way through the system.
Yes, correct.
And how many members does Vote have? How many members, whether they're formerly incarcerated or not? How many members do you have?
I know the Louisiana chapter in New Orleans have at least 200 members. Lafayette has a strong presence as well. And so altogether, I say we have over 1,000 members within the four chapters.
Wow. And then so you talked about how you identified some things that worked in other organizations, in this case in another state, maybe even multiple other states, and then you somehow organizationally were able to transmit or transfer that knowledge to the regular everyday members, to some of those 1,000 or so members. How are you doing that? Like, what is the culture of the organization that allows you or that enables you to then gather the information on the one hand, then share it with all the members on the other?
Okay, so we have so many different walks of life that is responsible for organizing and structuring vote membership and membership engagement. So we have people that are experts, that are doing the work, that have been doing the work, that have a passion for that, and they're very knowledgeable. You know, they constantly attend meetings. They're organized with so many different other organizations that each one teach one method definitely works. And that's what's happening with the vote culture. So many people have a lot of different avenues, and they bring a lot of different education and expertise to the table that we're able to talk among ourselves and we learn from each other. We learn from experiences. A lot of people been doing this a long time.
Hmm. And so, do you have regular political education sessions? Do you have regular skills building or training sessions? How do you incorporate that in the life of the organization?
We do. We have training sessions all the time. We have collaborations. And what happens is with the members' newsletters and at the monthly meetings, we always have the engagement where we are involved in community organizations. So if you're attending a meeting or you signed up for the newsletter, you're definitely going to get that information. And we push out information daily. There's always an email from either the executive director or members at Vote that is doing the organizing that let us know when there's training with our allies or opportunities or anything that's going on that we can gain insight from. And we discuss that at our monthly meetings. And if there is a need for further education, Vote implement that. And that's what I love about the organization. If there is a lack of knowledge, we make sure that we close that gap and that the people are educated and give them a free opportunity to come and gain this knowledge.
All right, so speaking of learning from other movements, of course, Florida passed this rights restoration amendment. It was a referendum in 2018. But since then, a lot of roadblocks have been put in the way. So what was imagined was that immediately after this passed, hundreds of thousands of formerly incarcerated folks would suddenly be able to register to vote. But that's not really the way that happened. Florida put up a bunch of roadblocks. Is Louisiana doing the same thing? If it is, what are you doing to prepare for that and to combat it?
I think that any political state, as such as Louisiana, when we know the history of Louisiana politics, that there's going to be some roadblocks. And so what we've been doing is partnering up with probation and parole. We've actually partnered up with the Power Coalition to just educate the community and host several events throughout the voting season, learning how to getting the people engaged and learning how they can exercise their rights, learning how the partnerships can work because everybody knows that there are formerly incarcerated people out here that need to register to vote or in some cases re-register to vote and what those obstacles can be, whether it's getting a ride. So let's just cover the basics. If you're formerly incarcerated and you have no idea how you can restore your voting rights, okay?
Hmm.
First things first, you can attend a meeting or a community event that's going to give you the 101. And we lay it out in simplest terms. This is what it takes. This is what you need to do. And most often, we have probation and parole there on site. So all you have to do is know your information, give it to probation and parole. You'll receive a letter if you're eligible or not, depending on the circumstances, if Act 636 is beneficial to you or not. And then learning your voting location. And if a ride is a problem, we even take care of that on the day off.
Right. Okay, so that covers rights restoration or voting rights for those who are formerly incarcerated. Do you also engage in prison reform work, which is a big major area these days?
Yes, yes. And definitely with our partnership with, we have First 72 and we also have the Innocent Project of New Orleans.
And what does that look like? What is the work? So the Innocence Project then tries to get people out who are wrongly convicted. But
That's right.
what does prison reform type work look like?
Prison reform type work in my lens, I can say through the organization, it looks like equality. It looks like fair and equal treatment if you are incarcerated. It looks like advocating for making sure that the sentence guidelines are, fair and that it's not harsh. Whether it's medication, whether it's mental health services. So we advocate on the lines of everything from the beginning of intake to prison sentencing till releasing.
And right now, because there's been so much attention focused on mass incarceration, there's a growing call for prison abolition, most famously led by critical resistance. But there's a growing call for abolition. So is Vote looking at prison reform, or is Vote looking at prison abolition?
I think we're looking at both. I think I can honestly say that we're paying a close focus at both issues because again, there are some people who are incarcerated who have committed crimes, and that we just want to ensure that there's fair treatment while they're serving incarceration and rehabilitation is being provided to those individuals. So when they, reenter society, that they have a trade or tool and some knowledge of how this works once they reenter.
Hmm. Well, the argument of those who are prison abolitionists is not that people don't commit crimes, is that putting
Uh-huh.
people in cages is in and of itself wrong. Do you have a position on that? Or are you trying to ultimately, whether it's a short term or long term, end prisons themselves as institutions, or are you trying to make the prison experience something that is more that reforms people or that is a part of society but has a much smaller footprint?
Okay, so for me, I can only speak for me because Vote is a large organization, and I'm
Uh-huh.
sure that that will go many different ways according to our members, but
Of course.
collectively we have, yeah, collectively. For me, I really favor restorative justice, and I really think that there should be more rehabilitation than capital punishment. That's my personal take on this. And so I personally, I vow to end mass incarceration, and I also want to work on not having people who are suffering from mental illness housed in prison as just
Mm.
a place to put them, because we have a huge population that is suffering. We have a population that is misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, and that are not in treatment that need mental health services.
And so for you, what would that look like? So someone who is not able to get a job because of the economy and because of their level of education that they were given in the public school system, robs someone in order to rob someone else in order to eat, in order to feed their family, for whatever reason that they do that. And then, so one person has been robbed, their valuables have been taken, maybe they've been injured. What would restorative justice look like in that case?
Restorative justice will look like a solution for that individual. Training, a second chance, understanding that the crime that they committed and the impact on the victim, and collectively coming together with a plan of care for the next 48 months. What does that look like in short term goals of taking 3 and 4 months at a time, breaking it down, understanding that this is what you've done. This can't be done moving forward. And here are the opportunities, and making sure that that person is mentored. That's
Hmm.
something that Vote does as well. There's so many mentors, there's so many people that personally are impacted, that have so many stories that help prevent other people from going down that same path. And that's essential to this line of work of what we're doing.
So, when people talk about mass incarceration, we obviously talk about the disproportionate impact mass incarceration has on Black communities. You have just spoken very
Mhm.
passionately about the impact that could have on people with mental health issues, and of course, people living in poverty. Is there a particular or special role for women in this movement? The Vote website is just full of women, it seems like, in positions of leadership in the organization. Is there a particular role or a special role for women in this organization and in the movement in general against mass incarceration?
I think I would have to say yes. I would definitely have to say yes. There is a particular role for women, because if you have kept up with what's been going on, women, far as monthly sanitation and what they need for personal, we had to fight and advocate that tampons and maxi pads were not just a necessity.
Mm.
And so, that was something that we had to fight for. If you had good behavior, you were awarded tampons and maxi pads in prison, knowing that you can't control, a monthly cycle. That's something that should be given to you, and not something that you should have to earn. And who can advocate better for a woman than a woman?
Right, because I think when we think about either prison reform or mass incarceration, we think about men being shot by the police or men in prison fighting or being beaten up by guards, we don't think about, as the first thing, think about women who are denied access to basic necessities in life.
And not only that, I mean, you have incarcerations that are happening with women, and you're taking mothers away from their kids. There's women who are incarcerated during pregnancy that are not routinely going to doctor visits, especially here in Baton Rouge, in the jail in Baton Rouge. I can actually speak, and I spoke with several people who are parents and family members of people who didn't receive fair treatment while in prison, especially women, And there's only, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me to the exact number, two or three reentry places for women in the entire state of Louisiana.
Hmm.
Now, Louisiana is a huge coverage. And so when women are released from prison, they don't have an alternative. They either go to family members or they go into homeless shelters.
Well, I think the other thing that as you're talking about the impact on mothers and children, if a mother is incarcerated, I actually think back on your personal story, and you talk about how your life was impacted by seeing your mother and your grandparents engaged in civic activism, in organizing, and how that shaped your life. So I'm just imagining what that would have been if instead of you being exposed to something so positive, you would have been exposed to the insides of a prison.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, what is the Bella Promise Love Campaign?
I didn't expect that. Okay, so so this is what I want to say about that. So I am the executive director of my own nonprofit organization, Bella La Femme Society. So the Bella Promise is actually something that I started on July 25th because being engaged in this work can get heavy and it can have a mental weight on the organizers and the people who are advocating because sometimes it seems like justice is not coming fast enough. So, with all of that in mind and my background in mind, I wanted to develop something for men and women for us to actively take and for us to hold each other accountable. And all of the vote members at the meetings in New Orleans actually took the Bella Promise. So I was excited about that, and they're holding on to their commitment. The members are holding on to their Bella Promise, and we currently have 512 people on a national level that have taken a Bella Promise.
And what is the Bella Promise? What are you promising?
It's a promise. It's a promise to promote self-love and intentional love for others. It's a promise to live more, and it's a promise to purify the heart, the
Mm-hmm.
eternal part of a being. And
Mm-hmm.
so, whatever that looks like to you, let's say you know that you work long, long hours and you not incorporating sleep. Well, the promise holds you accountable. So,
Uh-huh.
2 to 3 days out the week, you try to incorporate intentional good. So when you're getting more rest, you're gonna be more proactive among the people that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. You
Mm.
won't be so cranky. You won't be so the love is being spread, especially in a society where we are so at odds and racial tension is so high and civil unrest is so prevalent. So that is the reason for the development.
Huh. I have to say, this seems like a bit of a strange connection when just looking at it on the surface. When I go to the website of the Voice of the Experience and see videos and pictures of these blue shirts, which is what the organization members wear out in public, in really deep 50, 100, 200 people marching and chanting really powerful militant marches on the one hand, and then on the other hand, we're talking about self care, mental wellness, and in your words, purifying the heart. Those seem like two really, really different things that are being held inside of one brain. So, is there a real connection between these two seemingly disparate concepts of militant action on behalf of formerly incarcerated people and on purifying one's heart?
Yes, I think it's called balance. And what happens with both is that through the organization, you have some members that are more militant than others, and you have members who are fired up and ready and I mean, really determined to make a difference. And then you have individuals that understand that it's a marathon. and not a sprint. And so balancing those two, you always have to take care of home. You always have to take care of yourself because advocacy, criminal justice reform, and just the racial bias that is happening to people of color, you need that balance. And I think that understanding the two and bring that balance.
All right, Laketa Smith of Voice of the Experience and Abella La Femme Society. Thank you so much for joining
Yes.
us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, that's our show. Thank you for listening to The Next World. I'm Max Rameau. You can find out more about my work at pacapower.org. That's PACA power.org. You can read more in depth on many of the issues we talked about, like transformative justice, on the Partners for Dignity and Rights website, dignityandrights.org. We'll be back with another episode of The Next World next month. Until then, please subscribe and tell your friends and post reviews wherever you get your podcasts. Goodbye for now. Remember, organize, organize, organize.